So today I'm going to talk about an experiment that you can run to find out if some of the identity belief things that I've been talking to are right for you. And by right for you, I mean like perhaps the obstacle, the unseen obstacle that you've been stuck up against. So if you guys can let me know how my volume is. Can you hear me okay? I'm by a highway and there's a little bit of wind. Sweet. All right. So great to see so many of you here. All right. So what I'm talking about today is an experiment that you can structure and run to see if some of the things that I've been talking about as far as identity and belief are really what's underneath what you've been stuck against. Hi. So this concept I'm actually kind of modifying from a metaphysical studier of Christian literature. So Emmett Fox talks about scientific prayer, and maybe it's somewhere else, maybe it's not, but his presentation, I think, is most accessible in bypassing any kind of resistance you might have to something being Christian. I personally had been exposed to religion in a way that was like, oh, you're going to talk, like, cut off. Like, I was not open to hearing any of that material. But he talks about it in a much more, it's non-inflammatory. He's just sort of saying like, hey, you can interpret some of those texts in this way, and this is the lesson that's in it for him, and sort of like removes any of the emotional attachment you might have to religion, or rather sidesteps it. So it's called scientific prayer, and basically if we look at the world, this is sort of my riff on it, if we look at the world as quantum, whatever we focus on, we experience. It kind of persists. And so an example of that would be, does anyone have one they want to use? Let's say that there is a conflict in your life. So we'll do an interpersonal conflict, somebody that you're kind of like butting heads with, and you are running a script internally all the time that's like, this is what I would say, and this is how I make them understand, and this is why they're wrong. And so you are running this continuously, and maybe this is somebody in your family, maybe this is somebody in your life, and you just cannot get that relationship to a point of understanding. So what's scary about this is actually not that scary, but at first it seems wrong. And so what I'd ask you to do, okay, that's a great thanks, I'll use baby mom. Because I've actually worked through this with a client very successfully. We're talking about like completely transformed his relationship with his baby mama because he stopped holding her apart from him in a way that was like contentious. So I'm also going to pull in a little neuro-linguistic programming here. And to me, my interpretation of that as a tool is basically you add another, you become aware of your thought landscape in a way that you can manipulate it differently. And so I'm going to ask you to visualize some kind of box. Maybe it's a treasure chest. Maybe you get really creative. Maybe it's like this tunnel that maybe it's like in Donkey Kong, the mine cart level where you like have to like, go down. So you've got this kind of vault that you're going to put this topic in for 3 days. So that basically means that anytime you notice you are running some kind of dialogue, thought, problem solving around this topic, you're going to close it off and instead kind of like throw up this rainbow of love, or maybe it's some I Dream of Jeannie Twinkle. Two different visual components. So you put the thoughts that you don't want in the box, the bucket, or the vault, and then you kind of like side swipe it into something else. Yeah, cave is great. And you like lighten it. Yeah, the tree is great. Okay, so if you're joining, what we're talking about today is a strategy that's kind of like a riff off of Emmett Fox's presentation of the scientific prayer that leverages the fact that this is a quantum experience, and basically whatever you focus on, you expand. And so this is a way to kind of smooth over any problem that you have because you are applying this treatment to it that changes your consciousness level. And so similar to what Einstein says about you can't solve the same can't solve a problem with the same mind that created, the space that you gain from this, no shit, changes the way that you interact with it, because the options on your drop-down menu expand. And so I know I'm talking kind of fast from a few different angles, but some of the examples that we had today were about an ex. So let's say that you are having difficulty finding a middle ground with this person, and it is just like this constant source of tension or frustration. I'm suggesting that for the next 3 days, anytime that you notice you start to think, the motherfucker, I wish, or could, blah, blah, you completely stop and drop the thought, put it in the vault, kind of do like this magic twinkle in your mind. So it's like wash it clean and redirect your focus to whatever is present. And so this is actually, like, as far as I can tell, the way to create like life of your dreams. But it's worked personally for me, and when I've applied it to clients, what you do in summary again is provide yourself or allow space so that you somehow view the problem differently. And so what seemed like impossible before is no longer impossible. I had a client who did this with his ex and the mother of his child, and no shit, like, their entire relationship is completely different. It's very helpful if you give yourself the opportunity to consider that anything that person might have been doing that was pissing you off was coming from a place of fear or pain. And so as soon as you can start to transition from like, I'm gonna get you, to like, wow, you must really be hurting to like be that much of a bitch, somehow, like, it's a miracle maker. You might also try to do this. Let's say there's something that you've been struggling with and taking care of your body. It's so easy every time you pass a mirror, every time you pass food, every time you see somebody else to be like, to really like reflect back negatively on your body. That doesn't do shit except make you feel bad. And so if you can, even like, so let's say like ultimately your objective is weight loss. When you have that experience, or maybe you have some kind of disease that is aggravated through inflammatory triggers, maybe it's some kind of like, I mean, most health concerns are aggravated through inflammatory eating, but also through stress. So anytime that you are experiencing or you're hitting one of those outside things and you're like, I hate, like, I wish this was different, I wish that was different, and you think about it, you actually worsen the problem. So physiologically, putting yourself in a stress response will make you hold weight, will make your inflammatory response heighten. Like, it is so counterproductive, but we're for some reason afraid to let up on ourselves, because it's like, oh, but if I don't stop calling it a problem, I'll never do anything about it. But I always say, like, but are you really doing something about it right now? Are you? So if you structure it as an experiment and you give yourself the freedom to not interact with it negatively for a period of time, it somehow seems less scary. So it's like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe if you take your focus off it, the problem gets worse. And you might have that subconsciously lingering, like, I'm afraid if I don't think about it, it'll get worse. So just cap it as like a 3 or 5 day experiment and give yourself the freedom to, again, like, pack away, destroy the old thought. Some people do like kaboom things where it's like, oh, I noticed this thought, like kaboom, and then in its place like a flower grows or something. And it sounds silly, but it fucking works. And so what I'm citing today as resources that you might want to look into to get more information on this are Emmett Fox's work on scientific prayer, neuro-linguistic programming, hey guys, and quantum mechanics. So when you pull all of these things together, it's pretty fucking crazy what's possible. And so going back to the body example, closing that out, what you would do instead is if you notice that there is something outside that makes you feel bad inside, rather than reflect it in a way that's like, oh, that's not me, I'm not good enough, I'm not that, appreciate it in the other person and sort of read it as like a sign that you're getting closer. So if you see somebody that looks really fit, you say, wow, I really appreciate the care or attention that you've given your body. See if you can find that sense of like appreciation, and not from like, it's not gratitude so much as like awe, like, wow, I notice. Like appreciation to me is a very deep, open noticing. And so if you can take you out of the equation entirely and don't reflect back at all in a way that's negative and really appreciate what you are experiencing present. And maybe this is something you do with wealth. Maybe when you notice people have a house, a car, something that you don't, and you feel bad and you think, I'm not doing it right, I fucked it up, I'm not there yet, I'm not this, I'm not that. Rather than reflect back in a way that's comparative and makes you feel bad, see if you can appreciate them externally. And so not only is this like practical from a physiological standpoint, because again, you incite a physiological response when you think. So imagine if I saw something scurry over here, I could have a response that my body thought I was in danger, but maybe it was a leaf. And so the way that we take in and interpret information changes our physiology. And if you are thinking things that have a negative impact where it puts you in deeper and deeper fear, you are cranking up your fight or flight response, which in a chronic state is the source of pretty much every lifestyle disease. And it's, again, like if we're talking about weight loss, you hold fat in a fight or flight state because your body's like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to eat again. So there are all of these natural responses that you can start to like take leadership of through being mindful of if you are like prodding the beast or if you are like soothing the child. And so most of our judgment, our self-judgment, is a function of language that we picked up as children anyhow. And so really who you are talking to in those instances is your inner child. You're saying, it's okay, baby. Like, no, it's okay. Like, I hear you judge you, I hear you say this, but you're okay. It's okay. Breathing is another way to kind of like interrupt those thoughts. And it's honestly, for a really long time, I was like, okay, yeah, like I'm gonna be with my breath. Like that didn't work for me, but the more that I deepen my physiological practice, like the more I deepen my awareness in my body, the more that actually does make a difference for me. So I'm not sure where you are or if that's a helpful solution, but if you can at least just like modulate your breathing so it's deeper or slower, that can also impact that fight or flight. What's really trippy though is, and if you're watching my shit, this is probably true for you, you may have been in fight or flight for a minute. Like a minute. I personally think I've been in fight or flight for like 20 some years. And so it might take time to really like ratchet that response down where not only, so let's say you bring yourself to a place of safety or rest, you might be concerned because you've never experienced it long term that the bottom will fall out anyhow. And so you, in your state of comfort and safety, you then have a fear response about losing that sensation. And so in that instance, see if you can talk forward to it and be like, look, if that happens, here's what we'll do. If I lose this space of safety and comfort, here's what I'll do, and it'll be okay. And if you can kind of like walk your mind back to the idea that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay, that'll start to lessen the fight or flight that you've got going on. Yeah, it is really, and it's so wild the way that it limits what options you see available, because if you look at something like overeating or overspending or any kind of behavior that is like self-destructive, it's because our ability to trust the continuity of our experience has been compromised. And so if we've been in an environment that had like spurts of chaos or trauma or whatever, it's really difficult to expect that a minute later is going to be there and going to be safe. And so if we have access to resources and in a time we're like, we got to go now, because we don't know what's going to be later. And so if you can even be kinder to yourself about that pattern, it'll help it right itself, which is crazy because again, it seems like, oh, I should be nice to myself and that'll fix it. Yeah. It's nuts, I know. And so, over drinking, like there's so many adaptive behaviors that exist because we aren't confident in our safety in a later moment, and so we're like now, and so it's like one of the best examples I think I can give. And let's say partner selection is, let's say you need a pair of shoes tonight. You're going somewhere and you need shoes tonight, and only one store is open. When you go to that store, you're like, well, I got to get something here. I got to make it work. Versus like if you had like 6-week lead up and an opportunity to exchange, try and go into thing, what you walk out with in the latter example is so much different. It fits and it feels good, whereas the one that's rushed does not. And so we do that in partner selection if we need love. If we're not giving ourselves love, hey Joe, if we're not giving ourselves love, then it's like, I'll take it from whatever fucking store is open. Like, I don't care what it looks like. I don't care if it fits. I'm gonna get it right now. And so it's so interesting whenever we give ourselves the freedom to feel comfortable or confident in a later moment, what choices we make better. And the best thing you can do, again, is just to be kind to yourself when you notice that you are acting in this place of lack or shortage, rather than being like, oh, you're doing it wrong, you say like, oh, okay, you're scared. That's okay. Of course you're scared. Shit was hard. Like, let's just relax for a second. Let's just relax. It's okay. You're okay. You did the best you could. That will walk you out of pretty much any trauma pattern. I mean, that's a broad statement. I can't really back that up, but I'll say that I've watched it walk a lot of people out of some really deep, strong trauma patterns. So if you are joining, what I was talking about today has really gone a bunch of different ways. I'm going to scroll back. I saw a comment come in. Only can give certain people the time they deserve, but yeah, can help taking the bad thoughts towards the person and just focus on the things that need to be handled. Yeah, it's so that I think is in response to what I was saying about this concept of allowing your mind to rest on thoughts that feel good rather than keep them engaged in this narrative of a problem that you might have been experiencing, like interpersonally, or maybe it's a lack of a resource or time. If you continuously visit and poke at the problem that feels bad, it's difficult to get enough space from it to really handle or treat it towards success. So to me, the difference is like fighting a problem versus finding or living a solution. If you stay problem focused, then you stay problem focused. If you stay solution focused, then you know, see what I'm saying here? So I talked about that today. I also talked about fight or flight in a elongated or chronic state. And so what happens when people have had difficulty in their formative years, they sort of project that forward in a way that they sort of are built to expect it to suck. And so when you kind of like walk into a room and you have this mindset like shit's gonna suck, well then you kind of see things that suck. And conversely, if you walk in and you only expect to see good things, you miss some things that you might need. So really, it seems like the best point of interface is one of awareness and confidence. So you're saying like things can be whatever they are, and I trust me to manage and honor and protect the integrity of my system and the others. So this is different than saying like, so this to me is like a step beyond what it's like when you see only light, you see only light, but we do exist in a world that's split, and it doesn't mean that there isn't light behind the dark, but it does seem helpful to give yourself the flexibility or the freedom to see the terrain in its contrast, its natural contrast, and it doesn't mean that you walk around damning things saying that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. You just notice. So it's sort of like if I'm walking on the ground, I want to see if there are rocks, but it doesn't mean that I'm saying that the rocks are bad. I just notice that there are rocks and I adjust my footing accordingly and stay very focused on my desire. I let that lead where I drive, and that would be sort of the solution that I'm talking about as well. So I know I kind of like railed through a ton of material today. Are there any questions before I close out? I really appreciate everyone coming out and commenting and waving. All right, so I'm going to wrap this up for my own practice. So if you've been watching my lives in the past couple months, I've been using this space to practice talking to some of the more abstract concepts that I use in facilitating behavior change with clients. And so I've been working one-on-one with clients for more than 6 years now. And what I help them do is really kind of like get in at those ideas that they picked up in their formative years that are pinching off the possibilities that seem available to them right now. And it's a very sneaky thing because you don't notice that you're doing it because it's you. So I started using the example of like, it's like when you look out through the world through your glasses, you don't see your glasses, just the world. And if you keep having the same problem over and over, whether that's not feeling successful in relationships, not feeling comfortable with money, not taking care of your body or yourself, it might be something on your glasses as what you see as available. And it's a very intricate relationship in that it's like it's part of how you think you need to be to exist in the world. So we have these ideas around psyche safety, which is something that I'm kind of like making up, and that's basically like, how do I ensure that I have access to love and connection? And one way we do that is maintaining our personality. So it's like, I need to be the same way so that I can connect with these people in a way that's like, I can count that they'll be there and I'll be there, so I need to be the same. And so you might maintain an aspect of your personality that's detrimental to you because you think that you need to be able to be understood and feel connected. So personally, that was like a big area for me to overcome because I had been conditioned to be this like bright, shiny, that's okay, light, but it had actually been to my detriment because there is kindness in a way that's manipulative because I'm not being honest in my exercise of boundaries. I'm not saying, hey, that makes me uncomfortable. I'm saying like, don't worry, I'll make you comfortable. And so in that, I'm sort of manipulating or falsely maintaining harmony at my expense and ultimately the expense of the other. So in transitioning out of that as a way of being, I got a lot of feedback from like my grandparents, like, Shaylee, you're different, you changed. I'm like, yeah, motherfucker, the other way wasn't working for me. And so it's when you can, again, like the point that seems to be the most important to really connect with and own is a connection to your own desire, not desire that you think you should have. So it's not like, I need to have a house, I need to have a family. It's like, I want this right now. And it's not want from a need standpoint, it's want from like a inspired standpoint. So it's like, it feels right that this is the next thing for me to do. And when I'm talking about want, I don't necessarily mean like I want to buy something. In fact, I barely mean that at all. I more mean that I want to do this right now. It's sort of like, if you feel uncomfortable seated and you want to move your body to be comfortable, then you like allow yourself to shift. But a lot of us have been conditioned to ignore those self-writing behaviors. And so we just kind of sit in this position that's uncomfortable because other people told us we had to. And so when I'm talking about connecting to your inner want and your desire, I'm talking to connecting to that wisdom internally that's like, this would make me feel better. And there might be, so again, like I attract people because I personally have been through some shit, who have been through some shit. And so there's almost like this line, this horizon line, this point of neutrality, where under here, you've got like some work to come up to feel safe. And then after that, the way that you behave is different. But in the beginning, you're not going to be able to express at your highest expression. You have to allow for yourself to come to neutral and really like, I think the word heal is misleading and kind of like short. Really what I mean is like come to terms with and accept. And so it's like and forgive. There are like different activities below the line that don't look like shit, but they're important and are required for any kind of building above the line. And going back to what I said earlier, it seems like the easiest way to get to this line is to be so fucking nice to yourself. It's like unbelievable. No matter what you do wrong, no matter if you did it intentionally or not intentionally, you really just kind of with you, and you're like, it's okay. I know it's okay. I know it's okay. You're okay. It's okay. And really be with you, and that's how you build this foundation of safety. And once you've got that going for you, then the choices that are available to you, what you decide to do, how you act, how you interact with the world is towards, it's like, that's when shit gets good. But you have to give yourself some freedom and some time to get to that point. And it's not wrong, it's just a different experience. And what seems to be really beautiful about it is if you've had experience below the line, your experience above the line is heightened because you appreciate it, because you know what it's like to not. So it's like if you grew up and you always had running water, you don't really think about it. You just have running water. But if you had an experience where you didn't have running water, when you have running water, you're like, whoa, fuck, this is nice. And so that same thing in any area of your life can be really celebrated. So it's like, yeah, stuff sucks, but you know, when I come to my safety place and I move above and beyond that, what I experience will be so much richer and deeper because I know what it's like to not. Habit neutrality and normalcy. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty. So this is all right. So going back, so I started to talk about the work that I do with clients, and I've had this product, the Habit Book, for some time, and it seems like, and honestly, it started as a way to support the adoption of habits related to physical well-being, so nutrition, fitness, sleep, breathing, and then it sort of expanded and started to include emotional intelligence, and then like interpersonal stuff, and then like all these different things, and it morphed, and now it's this framework to support subconscious retooling, because those are the habits that make these habits accessible. And so we kind of go behind the line, like behind the face, and work with these ideas of who you are, what's safe for you to do, what's possible for you to do. And as those things shift, the choices that you make with your time, with your resources, with your body naturally move. So there's no force, there's no willpower, there's no it's just this natural expression of love of self and love of life. It's really, really beautiful, if I do say so myself. And so that's sort of what I am preparing to make available in a course called, actually the first course, Identity and Beliefs 101, will just be to see if, kind of like a test for you to move through to see if okay, the shit that I've been dealing with, the trouble that I've been having, is that a function of this concept that Shaylee's saying? Is that possible for me? Is that really what my issue is? And then from there, if it is, I'll help you navigate to a course that would be right for you. And so I talk about 3 different environments. There's the mind environment, the body environment, and the you environment. And it's kind of like a spiral. And if your body is pulling you down, and that means maybe you're underslept or you're not eating the right nutrients, it kind of affects your mind and your experience of self. Similarly, if you've got everything on lock physically, but your mind is focused on problems, that'll pull your health down. And the you environment is more like relationships, concepts of self, are you being true to what you are interested in and desirous of? All of those either kind of move up or they all move down, and you can affect change of the overall system at any of those entry points. So if it's easiest for you to start to sleep more rather than to start to monitor your self-talk, then you start there. If it's easier for you to start to pay attention to your self-talk and add more self-soothing and change your mind environment, then you start there. The you one is kind of that one's a tougher one. That's the hardest one to unlock, because we're kind of conditioned away from our individuality and trusting our inner guidance. So it's do we want to pay attention to the script or the path that's been laid externally, or do we want to listen to ourselves? And listening to ourselves somehow comes off as this really scary, wrong thing, because it's if you want to go to A, you have to do 1, 2, 3. but that's just like, it doesn't seem to hold. I mean, it is true to an extent, but the feelings that a person expects to find at that location aren't ever there. So it's just sort of chasing like mirages. All right, so I talked a lot today about a bunch of different topics. We covered how to employ a mental strategy, a mental organizational strategy to lessen tension you might be feeling in interpersonal relationships or problems. I talked about extended or chronic fight or flight and how that might be encouraging or proliferating self-destructive habits. I talked about the identity concept and the layers in behavior, particularly with I don't know, I can say this many words at once. I think I just used them all. All right, well, you have to scroll back if you want to see the other stuff. It was really nice to see everybody today. Thank you for the turnout. Thank you, Joe, Rick. Who else was there? Derek, JC, Ezekiel, Alex. Thanks, guys. There's a ton of you here. Sweet. All right. Have a great day. If any of these topics are interesting to you, so I just had started to spin off and talk about the course that I'm working on. If any of this is interesting to you, this is the service that I provide for clients. I know that many are economically impacted right now, and so if my price point isn't accessible, just send me a message and we can figure something out to make it work for you. I'm super passionate about this work. It's sort of like what's been given to me to do, and anybody that ever shows up on my desk or at my desk on my desk is usually like, we do some magical shit. So please don't ever hesitate to reach out. It's really, it'd be my pleasure.